Welcome to the conversation where every week we just sit down together and we talk about matters of our faith, of our religion, of our life, and what's going on there. We talk about this stuff all the time, but sometimes we sit down and talk about it in front of you. And today we have with us Kevin Culy. And Kevin is a pastor. He has been through a lot of things we feel like would make sense for us to talk together about. But among those, right up front, is we're talking about what it's like to be a person of faith, to continue to believe and have gone through those things and yet battle with addiction. That's specifically what Kevin will be helping us talk through. But to be just battling with sin, right? I mean, like, because you're a pastor, you have no sin, right? Never happens again.
That's it.
Never happens again. We never have no sideways thoughts. Never occurs. None of that. We never lust. Never again.
I would say off the top, I'm not a pastor now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, I'm
understood.
Retired for a few years now.
Okay.
From that.
Like as if you can retire from that, really. But.
Yeah, right. I still preach. I still speak.
Yeah.
But
stop loving people, Kevin. Right now. Yeah. So I've heard of you for quite some time, Kevin, or that guy. Yeah. Rick and I have been friends for years and years and years, and from time to time, when he gets to thinking about people of faith, people who have walked a, what's the word I'm looking for? A blunt, a very frank, a very challenged faith walk, including some of the physical ailments that you've dealt with and going through over time, you come up. You're somebody that jumps to mind for him and he'll talk about. And so we thought, as far as the conversation is concerned, we need to get people to be a part of that and understand that. I mean, we joke around about the fact that pastors don't ever sin again. As I said one time, I had a saint of the church in his 80s look at me and say he was saved and sanctified at 18 and never sinned again. And then tell us a story of a horrifying thing that had happened to him in a parking lot that day and how he'd lost his temper and said some things he shouldn't. So we need to frame that, right? We need people to understand that that's not the goal, right? To not be, not necessarily to be perfect in that sense, but that there is a walk that still occurs, right? So, I don't know, where do we jump off at, guys?
Well, I think today it's going to be important for us to let everybody know that we're going to be talking about what does it mean to be a Christian and yet still deal with addictions. We're going to be talking specifically more about drug addiction, but addiction, in the broader sense, addiction is addiction is addiction. Whether you're dealing with drug abuse, alcoholism, pornography, there's a chemical thing that happens in your brain when you're dealing with an addiction. And it actually, as far as drugs are concerned, that change actually happens in your brain to where it makes you, it calls at you constantly.
Okay.
And the other part about addiction, as far as drug abuse is concerned, and Kevin and I have talked before, dealing with an addiction with prescription drugs or whatever, it's like right out of hell, man. I mean, it's not stretching it too far to say that dealing with an addiction like that is hell on earth. I mean, it puts you, everything that you have had, everything that you have known up to the point of beginning is taken away. And at that point, then I think that what we want to do, Kevin, is talk to you about what your story was and how your story began, and know that as people who have dealt on various levels with addiction, that It is indeed possible to love the Lord and cry out to the Lord, and yet still be dealing with the temptations of whatever that addiction might be. So I'm going to let you just give us a little bit about your story and why we kind of got here today.
Well, I'm going to try to keep this brief so we don't spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to share how it began. How does a pastor become addicted?
Sure.
You know, I mean, that sounds like an oxymoron, you know.
It does.
And
some people think you're supposed to be above reproach.
Right.
Then none of that should happen.
Yeah, right. So how it all began was I was on my way to work one day. I was a welder, and I wrecked my car. I flipped it end over end into a ditch that was about 10, 15 foot drop. I flipped it into that and rolled it, and that began a string of migraines that has never stopped. The migraines are just off the chart, and it just seemed like each month and each year they progressed, you know. And I started on medication with my doctor that was pretty lame medication, non-addictive, you know, and going to neurologists and the whole thing. Me and my wife were laughing on the way here. We passed a neurologist's office, and I said, "That was the first guy I ever seen. Do you remember him?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Yeah, I remember. That's where it began." So I did all the typical traditional meds. None of that worked. He started me on Nubane, which is a narcotic that's given to pregnant women in labor.
Okay.
It's pretty light, but it does mask the pain some. And I don't think I want to get into arguing whether is addiction a disease or is it a choice or whatever. But I can tell you this, that for me, when I did Nubane for the first time, something clicked in me.
Okay.
And for the first time in my life, I don't mean to try to overstate this, but for the first time I felt normal.
Okay. Well,
I really felt like I could be in the crowd. I could you know, share my heart, and I could be normal, and I could be, you know, and all of these. I just felt different.
So when you say for the first time in your life, you mean the first time since the accident, or for the first time in your life?
First time in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, first time in my life when I did that drug. And Nicky Six, the bass player from Motley Crue, he'll tell you the same thing. First time he did heroin, he felt normal. He felt like he clicked with everybody else.
Okay.
You know, and he could be accepted, and he could be loved, and he could be all these things. It masks everything in you that's going on. So to get on with it, I started on Nubane. After a while, I got to a point where Nubane wasn't working. Then they put me on morphine and Demerol and Thorazine, and
Now we're walking up.
Yeah, you could not name a narcotic I wasn't on.
Okay.
And so I went on all of those, and then on down the road, I got to where I was used to them, and they weren't working. And so finally, he put me on a drug that I had never heard of. I didn't know what it would do. I didn't know anybody that was on it. The nurse told me, she said, "Kevin, all I can tell you is this is what we give people who are dying. And so we don't have to worry about their addiction factor." So she said, you need to be careful with it, you know. And I'm thinking the whole time, I can handle this. By then, I was full-blown addiction anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're basically going in a hospice drug.
Yeah.
At this
It's a
point.
hospice drug. It was fentanyl.
Oh,
we hear about fentanyl all day long these days. Yeah. And they put me on fentanyl, and I didn't feel like I was normal then. I felt like I was in hell then. Okay. Nicky Six said something, and I'll never forget it, because it spoke to right where I was at. He said, at the height of my addiction, I felt like I was at hell's door, knocking on the door, and nobody would let me in. I was stuck where I was stuck. And man, that was so me once I got on fentanyl. Everything turned from feeling normal to feeling like that. Everybody thinks that addiction, addicts, it's all about the high, or it's all about the party.
Yeah.
You know, let me tell you, the party goes right out the window right away. Okay. Then it becomes, I don't want to feel detox. You know, because if you're not, I couldn't go but a few hours and I would start to detox at the height of my addiction. Okay. So I had to take massive amounts every day to avoid the detox. And the detox is, well, I could try to explain it, but there's no way to explain what detox feels like. It's just...
Some people, for people who may not know, for some people they call it's being sick. You know. Yeah,
I've heard people say it's kind of like having the flu, but a little worse.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't touch it. Doesn't touch it.
If it was kind of like having the flu, but a little bit worse, I'd still be addicted.
Yeah.
Okay? There'd be no price.
Yeah.
You know, no, it's like pure hell. It is like pure hell.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell you now. This is where my addiction ended. Okay. If you got a loving wife, thank God for a loving wife. Okay. At the height of my addiction, I'd been on fentanyl for quite a while, and I got off of it. But then what I found was my level of addiction was so high from being on fentanyl that, like, I went back to Norco and started using that, and I found I had to use 2, 3, 4 times the amount to match the levels of that fentanyl was doing. Yeah. So there was one Sunday where all my scripts were coming due, and I'd been out of my scripts for a couple, 2 or 3 days. Yeah. That means I was nail-biting, white-knuckle detox, you know, and I had a sermon to preach. And as ugly as this sounds, that's just the way it was. I had a sermon to preach, I had a church to pastor, and I could call these guys and say, hey, I'm in detox.
Wait, life didn't stop because
right. So I was leading the worship also at the church.
Oh my word!
So I told her, I said, go to Walmart, get my scripts filled during worship, and then you beat it back to church, and I can have some of my scripts before I have to preach. Because I was not going to be able to do it without something in me.
Yeah.
So, long story short, she comes into the church and she hands me my bottles, trying to do it kind of indiscreetly, you know. And I was so depressed. I was at a state I had never been. And that Sunday, it was starting to dawn on me just how bad it really was. Here I am in the middle of church, and I'm doing massive amounts of narcotics. Yeah. And it started to really just, everything was starting to dawn on me. So I really didn't care how many I did, and I wasn't sure what my limit was. And that's when you're really running the risk of overdose when you don't know what your limits are anymore, when you can't get high anymore. And so I just poured out a handful. I was doing 300 Norco a month, and I would go through those in about a week. So I had to have more constantly, you know. Yeah. And so I poured out a whole handful in my hand, threw them in my mouth, drank them down with a Pepsi, and off I went. I preached, you know. Well, I got home, and for whatever reason, my wife felt like she needed to count my medicine bottle. She'd never done that, not in all the years I was using. And the things were at a level with me and her and the addiction. She knew something was really bad.
Yeah.
So she counted it. I did 75 Norco that morning.
Oh,
yeah,
my.
in church.
Word.
And then when I'd gotten home, I did approximately 20 to 25 more. once I got home, that like 2 hours later.
So you had a third of your month's worth.
Yeah, in one day.
In a few hours.
In a couple, 2-3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing that scared me to death. I didn't get high. I didn't get sick. And it had no effect. And I'm like, what can I do? What drug can I possibly do that is going to mask the pain? Because I did have serious pain, you know?
Yeah.
But so what drug am I going to be able to do that's going to mask the pain that, you know, is better than 100 Norco in one day, you know? And so she came outside. I was sitting on the porch and she came outside. Well, she had that medicine bottle in her hand, you know, and she was like, I don't care what you got to do, but whatever it is you got to do, you better do it.
Yeah.
And she didn't give me an ultimatum like, I'm out of here if you don't get clean, but I could feel it in her heart, you know. At least that's the way it felt to me, you know. And that was the beginning of my getting clean.
Well, I mean, for her, it was more like, hey, you're killing my husband.
Mm-hmm. And
you got to stop it.
I was running my, you know, I remember one time my son came home from college, and this was about that same period of time, you know, and I was in bed the whole time he was at home with us, you know. I was in bed sick, and so it come time for him to leave, and he wanted to come back and say goodbye to me, you know, so he did. And he opened the door a little bit, and he said, hey, Dad, and I could barely lift my head off I was so high, I could barely lift my head off the pillow, and I remember saying something like, yeah, what, you know, and he just said, I'll see you later. And he shut the door. And my son, I can only remember once or twice out of all the years I've known him that he's cried.
Yeah.
And he'd come out crying. And he told my wife, he said, Dad is back here in that bedroom killing himself. We got to do something or he's going to die.
Yeah.
And that really lit the fire too in my wife. And so
it wasn't just, she's like, I'm not the only one who's seeing this.
Right. It was not only affecting her, it was affecting the kids. It was affecting everything. And so, man, it was, but I knew that, you know, at that same point, it wasn't long after that I took a recovery group to lead. I was clean when I took the recovery group, but it wasn't long after that I took a recovery group to help lead it. And I just remember thinking I could no longer pastor, and I have to do detox first. I have to do recovery first.
Yeah.
And
before we get into you and dealing with, you know, yourself and where you were at both spiritually and physically, what was, you said at one time that your church was supportive of you. Did you find that with all Christians?
did I find out what?
Did you find that with all Christians that they were supportive?
Oh, no. Most Christians, in fact, most people in my recovery group, when I asked this as someone who was now clean, I asked the question one night, can you be a Christian and be addicted?
Okay.
And
so I'm going to ask that right now.
Right.
That
And their
simple.
overriding answer, I would say 90% of addicts, you know, who are supposed to be merciful towards other addicts.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, no, you cannot. You can't be one, you can't be both, you know. And so I said, well, we can be honest, right?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
That's all that we care about in here.
I
Say it
challenged
like
them.
it is.
I challenged them. I had probably half the room that night in my recovery group that were church-going folks.
Yeah.
They were there visiting.
Yeah.
You know, and so they always had a mixed reaction to my recovery group, and I knew this group. If I ever had one that would be more merciful, this group would be it, and they were. But I said I brought something up that no one had ever thought of. I said, so okay, so you can't be a Christian and be an addict. And they're like, yeah, right. I said, well, then explain to me King David.
Yeah.
King David had a problem with women.
Yeah.
And to the point where he killed one of his best friends to have that wife.
Yeah.
You know? And yet I read in the scripture where God says he's a man after my own heart.
Yeah.
You know? God didn't say he's a man without sin.
No.
He said he's a man after my own heart. You know? And I find it interesting when David got caught, when it all came down, and the prophet, sandblasted him.
You are the man.
Yeah, you're the man, baby.
Oh no!
You know,
You don't
David.
mean that the way I want you to.
David's prayer to God was, "Don't take your spirit from me."
Yeah.
He didn't say, "Save my kingdom." He didn't say, "Save my ministry." He didn't. He didn't say, "Keep my riches." He said, "Don't take your spirit from me," and that was totally my heart as I was detoxing. I cared that I lost the church or that I let it go, but when it come to what was most important to me on those, weighing them out on the scales, being right with God, and there again, I knew I had to be clean to be right with God. I wanted to be right with God, but I didn't want to lose God's anointing. I didn't want to lose God's spirit.
Yeah, don't take your spirit from me.
God's presence.
It's such an awesome way of thinking of that. I never really paid attention to those words in that way. Don't take your spirit from me. First, his spirit has to be with him for him to take it from him. So he had felt the presence. He had felt the presence of God with him. He knew that he was there in those moments. I think for me, when I think of David being a man after God's own heart, it's not that he was without sin. It was, what was his reaction when Nathan called him out?
Yeah.
When Nathan tells him that story and he's all ticked off and he goes, "Oh, by the way, you're the dude who's doing this." What was David's reaction? And David's reaction was complete contrition. He was completely broken by... Isn't it amazing that we can walk down a path that is sin, but that we can explain it away all the way down that trail, and that we can find ourselves in a hole somewhere and go, "What the heck? How did I get in this hole?" You know how you got in that hole. You know how you got in that hole. But there's a difference between Nathan in the moment with David. Hey, boss.
Yeah.
This is what you've done. This is what you've done. There's a difference between somebody calling it out and making it plain. Rick and I talk about our lives and struggles and things we go through. And it's amazing how having somebody else look at you and go, "Brother, that's the same story you told me 4 weeks ago. It's the same story you told me 2 weeks ago. What are we doing here?" How are we changing that thing? So, how do we explain all these people who, I don't know, we go through an awful lot. We go through... This whole book is not there. There's like almost, I can't think of one perfect person. None of them. None of them. Particularly the heroes. They're all broken, horribly broken people. So how can you say you can't be a Christian and not and be addicted, right?
Well, in our recovery group, we picked a banner verse, and I didn't pick it and say, "What do you guys think? Do you want to make this?" They picked it.
Yeah.
I had shared it one night during my opening statements, but they picked this verse, and it was the verse that represented us. We felt like, and it was Paul's words where he says, "The things I want to do, I don't, and the things I don't want to do, I do." And this is a guy who raised the dead. Yeah. And so, he struggled. He longed for that place with God. But at the same time, was honest enough to admit. It's one thing to say, yeah, I got sin. I mean, we all got sin. We got sin.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to name it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to say, hey, this is my sin. This is what I'm in.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing. You know? But I'll tell you what, if you're willing to do that, God will find a vessel every time He can use, because you're honest, you're open, you're transparent, and it's somebody that said, this was where I was at, this is how bad I needed God, and this is what God did.
And to me, that's the turning point on everything that we have in our lives spiritually. Whether you're willing, David owned up to it. Like you just said, you know, when he was confronted, I mean, there was that brokenness.
Oh, he was broke.
Yeah, there was that.
Crushed.
There was that, like, yes, yeah. It's that. You're saying the same thing with Paul when he says, "I do what I do not want to." He's lamenting, if you want to put it. He's saying, "Hey, here's the way it is with me." It's the same thing with us today. It's kind of a shame that in some Christian settings we feel like we've got to hide who we are and what we're dealing with. It's like you asked me before when we decided we were going to get together and do this. Can I be real? I mean, words were very specific. Can I be real? Can I get down to the nitty gritty? Absolutely, because that's where change starts.
We talked about, when we were talking to Pastor Jennifer Kaufman a couple weeks ago, we talked about this idea of lamentations and things that we bring out and all that. And one of the things that God said that I'm just gonna hold on to that forever is this idea that once a lament is stated, now we're doing business. Now we're dealing with it.
It gets real.
If we're holding it and we're just grumbling inside, we're just holding it. Now we're not doing business yet. But when you said, I don't want to put words in your mouth. When I think of somebody who is dealing with addiction, and like you guys were just saying, once you start through it, now we're going to deal with it. I think of there's a scene in John where Jesus is coming along, and there are people sitting at a pool where when they believe that an angel rustles the water, and if they go get in the water right quick, that they'll be healed. And there's this guy who's been there forever, and he can't stand up, he can't walk, he can't deal with it, and he's like, Jesus says to him, "Do you want to get well?" I'm like, do you want to get well? I mean, like you read a verse like 80 times, and then you read it one more time, and you're like, do what? What? Did he actually ask that question? Do you want to get well? What do you mean, do I want to get well? I might have been a smart aleck because I'm blind, I'm crippled, I don't know who this dude is. What do you mean, do I want to get well? Smart aleck, leave me alone. That's the beginning of healing for this guy. And I think maybe for an addict, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for an addict to step away from it, this step one is, do you want to get well?
Yeah.
Because that's some hard work you got coming.
Well, it all came together for me at a perfect time. You talk about God's hand, you know, my wife having enough, she was done with it. Me seeing my son cry, you know, that kind of thing. And it all came together like a perfect storm. And I was already sick to death of it. So, yeah, I wanted to get well. I was at a place where I wanted to get well. And these were just tools God was using, my wife, my son, and other circumstances to even push it more, you know. And yeah, I could have answered that question.
And so immediately you were not addicted anymore.
Yeah, you want to get well, but it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work that way, does it?
No.
So tell us about your journey back and your faith journey along with that.
I actually was dumb enough to believe that if I survived a week without the drugs, that I'd be okay.
Oh, okay.
You know, I thought that the detox would be over by then, and it wasn't. I couldn't afford a rehab, so I had to just detox at home, you know, and
Which is, not only is it hard, but it's dangerous.
it's dangerous. Yeah,
I mean-
I didn't have any medication to help. A lot of addicts get antidepressants and whatnot, you know, when they're in a rehab, and they get medical help. Well, I didn't have any of that, so it was 2 weeks of just what I call white knuckle detox. You don't sleep at night, none. You don't eat. I lost count one day. I was counting how many times I threw up, and it was around 10 times. But I was at the end of that, it was nothing but dry heaves, you know, and so. Your body is just going, your brain becomes tricked into thinking that it produces that high, that it produces all that.
Okay.
You know, and so when it's not getting the drug anymore, then it throws you into this hyper warped speed and is trying to trigger the high because it thinks it does that, you know. And so that's where the detox comes in. And so I can't explain detox. There's just, I do remember telling God when I laid down the first day in my bedroom, I laid down in bed and I had no idea what to expect. I knew it was going to be a ride. And I just told God, I said, here I am and here I lay. And if I die, I die. But if I get out of this bed, I'm going to get out of it healed. And that's it. I'm done. And I didn't read the Bible any. You can't read when you're in detox. But I did pray. I prayed a lot. You know, and that's all I did do was I prayed oh God prayers. Just oh God. You know. And,
2-word
yeah.
cries.
Yeah. And, who do you call when you're a pastor and you're addicted? Who do you call for prayer? You know, I didn't know anybody that I could call. So it was me and my wife and my children, you know. I did 2 weeks of really, really hard detox.
I'm going to stop you for a second. Because you said something that's got to be called out. Who do you call when you're a pastor and you're dealing with brokenness?
There was nobody then.
Call? Isn't that horrifying?
Yeah.
Isn't that horrifying? And the reason why? I know what I think. What do you think, Kevin? Why?
I didn't want, to be just bloody honest, number one, I didn't want people seeing me in that light.
Yeah.
Okay? I didn't want them seeing me as Pastor Culy, the addict. You know?
Yeah.
I didn't want that. But number two, I had heard enough from Christians concerning addiction. Yep. I knew they'd never understand where I was at.
Yep.
Unless they had been through the detox themselves, they would never get where I'm at. They would quote a verse for me. You know?
Sure, yeah.
And throw that out there and, God is faithful. Oh, and don't forget the prayer meeting Wednesday night, brother. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
When you're at home dying, Yeah. So,
in fairness to them, that's what they've been taught. That's what they know, right? They're trying. They don't know.
Right.
They got nothing for how to deal with it.
You know what? I tell you what. We say, we want revival in church. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, here's the price of the ticket. Right here. It's going to take the church actually being real.
Yep.
And then, because, oh man, my mom got me fired up this week. She had some Christians come over and visit her, right? Yeah. And they'd started a new church. And they knew she was going to a church. Now, Mom and Dad, well established.
Why are you fishing in someone else's pond?
Why are you coming over and and inviting my mom and dad to church, you know. And I said, Mom, just stop right there. She's going to kill me when she sees this on film. I said, Mom, just stop. You know, I said, why? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
You know, why are we inviting established Christians in a church? Why are we inviting them? How about invite somebody whose name is Ozzy? You know?
Yeah.
How about invite them?
Yeah.
You know? And so it's going to take us getting just really, really honest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think God, there are some Christians out there who don't have my testimony. They've lived a godly life. You know,
and we need those.
They don't have
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
like this to come
Yep.
clean on.
Yep.
And I thank God for that. You know, but at the same time, those same very Christians have got to learn that there are also Christians in the church that are going home broken every Sunday because they don't have anybody to turn to. They don't have anybody to confess to. You know?
What would be... Yeah, and I think what we're driving at is what would be are they scared of? What is it that someone who's addicted, someone who's... It doesn't even have to be someone who's addicted. It's someone who's dealing with brokenness. You know, what are they worrying about? And I think some of what we deal with what we're worrying about is persecution and being put out of the one thing that they have. That's one of the things, right? Mm-hmm. The other is, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be well? He said, I think the King James says, do you want to be healed? Sometimes being healed of addiction is scary. Mm-hmm. It's your, I hate to eat, but everybody on the planet has seen Mr. Mom, right? So you all know the reference. Mm-hmm. It's your whoopee, you know, it's your blanket, it's your comfort. It's you run to that. It's the thing that when I've dealt with addictions, when I've dealt with so tobacco addiction, I'm not comparing, okay, but I am saying an addiction. When I've dealt with pornography, it's we often call it self-medicating. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I'm self-medicating, when I'm solving the problem myself, because you don't want to know about my problem, I'm going to solve it myself. I'm dealing with sex drive nobody else ever dealt with, so I'm going to deal with it myself. I don't want you to have to deal with this gross thing. Girlfriend, wife,
Yeah.
mom and dad, friends at church. I'm not going to tell you about this because it's gross, but I can just be over here and just be me and you not know about that part of me, and you'll still love me. I think that's a lot of coming out of addiction, a problem with why don't we know that people in this church are dealing with addictions that they're dealing with? Why don't we know that people in this church are dealing with brokenness that they're dealing with? And I think it's because they're comfortable where they're at, and they're worried about.
Could be.
They're worried about walking out of that into the ramifications. Mm-hmm. Right? They won't love me anymore. They couldn't possibly love me anymore. Golly, I wish they would know that we'd love them every bit as much and know how to help.
That'll be the beginning of revival. It really will, because it would be it would be the thing that would open the doors. You know, it's one thing to say, "Come as you are." You know, it's nice. It makes, I call it bumper sticker Christianity.
Sure.
It's a nice sticker to put on your car. But at the end of the day, can I really come as I am?
Yeah.
You know, and can I stay that way for a while? Maybe I'm not buying
yeah.
into Christianity.
Oh yeah.
You know?
As Rick told me about my tobacco addiction at one point, he said, "Has God convicted you of that yet?" Well, I don't know that that's necessary. Oh, you'll know. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, just keep following. Mm-hmm. Keep depending on Him. Keep praying to Him. Keep moving through.
I think there's another side to this same coin. People who deal with addiction, I'm going to change the word from addiction to brokenness. People who deal with whatever brokenness don't always feel comfortable letting somebody else know what that brokenness is. It's scary.
Oh, it's absolutely
to trust
scary.
somebody with your weakness. But if
And
we
Satan is, I mean, we talk about Satan.
Oh yeah.
People talk about, well, Satan's not a real thing. Well, you haven't been in the car driving along with him in the passenger seat telling you.
Yeah.
Because he's very real.
The thought with
Satan
this
helps.
is we have to provide, we in the church have to provide a safe place for people to come and be real and be okay with sharing whatever their brokenness is or whatever their pain is. And until we do that, that's the aha moment for me. That's where things change in my life when I've had to deal with things. The minute it's brought to light is where you can start feeling things happen differently. But until we get to there, we have to provide that. We have to just be able to give that to each other. You, the three of us, Kevin, I've known you for years now. Todd, you and I have known each other from way back when we were playing a card game together.
Yeah.
But I have with both of you guys the opportunity to where I can say anything, and I know that it's going to be okay. Not that the situation's okay, but whatever I say to you is going to be okay. And you guys know that you have that with me. That's where the other side, it's the same coin. I really believe it's the same coin. On the one side, the church has to be willing to be open. On the other side, the person has to be willing to be open too. Kevin, you and I both know that there's been studies done during the time of Vietnam. A lot of guys were using over in Vietnam. A tremendous amount of guys were using in Vietnam. But they came back, and there was a lot of them came back and they were addicted, but there wasn't this massive addiction outbreak because they came back to real good support systems. Parents who loved them, wives who loved them, girlfriends who loved them, family who loved them. So they were able to get off of that merry-go-round that addiction causes. It's the same way if you can do that. A support system is so important with any addiction that you're dealing with. But we have to be the ones in the church to supply that. And then again, Kevin, what you said is very true. That's where revival begins. That's where that spiritual change begins and people get reconnected to where their lives are back.
Let me share something about brokenness. Brokenness is a good thing. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's a gift.
Absolutely.
It is truly a gift. I'm a musician, so I write songs, and I stuck this in my notes last night, and I didn't think it would really be relevant today, but it seems to be. I'm going to read a song that I wrote. It's called The Broken. I wrote this just after coming out of my addiction, and I was so broke over everything. Brokenness isn't a curse. It's a blessing in disguise. It's the end of your navel gazing, the start of looking to the skies. It's the answer to every prayer that you've ever prayed. An all-consuming fire equals a warrior that's made. I've led you to a place where the past counts for naught. Your trophies and your certificates burn when the fire's hot. Many will say it's the enemy. Rebuke him and he will leave. But if I spared not my son, then brokenness is yours to receive. Forged in the flame is where the high fives end. A picture of a broken life very few ever call friend. I've taken your creature comforts and offered you instead a sword of truth, a touch from God, and a warrior raised from the dead. Amen. And that's what it is. Amen. If we want to be we read these stories about these great men of God and these great women of God and all that they accomplished, all that they did. None of it. I've never seen one testimony yet where there wasn't a story of brokenness.
That's what I'm saying, man.
There
That
wasn't
whole
a story of brokenness in their life.
That whole book and our heroes of the faith of inside the book and outside the book.
Yeah.
They all have experienced a brokenness. They've known. Nobody understands a good meal like a man who's been hungry. Mm-hmm. Nobody gets it like a man who's been hungry. I mean, it's a trite little story, but I remember as a Boy Scout, we all went out and they took us, and we were the first year scouts, and all these older scouts took us, went to Brown County. We went on this 26-mile hike through Brown County. We thought we was dying. I never had a better tasting Clark bar in my whole life than when we got back. And maybe we needed something lighter, but nobody understands being fed like somebody who's been hungry.
Yeah.
You just don't get it. When you're David, this pretty little hero who never had any issue with his faith at all, who was they said he was just beautiful to look at, and so strong, and they were not scared of nothing. Nobody understood what it was like to be broken like him. When he was broken, he understood what he had, and he understood what he wanted to get back to. Yeah.
We've kind of answered the question, can you be a Christian and still be an addict? It's no different than having any other issue.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you.
Okay.
You answer that question.
Well, that's where I was going to go.
Say, Kevin,
I was going to go, but you interrupted me.
I interrupted you. Yeah.
Tell us where you're at.
What I'm doing today?
Yeah.
Or,
Where's your walk, brother?
Yeah.
well, I've given up on the walk. I mean, I got to tell you, man, it's just, it's too tough. No. Where's my walk?
That was an interesting show.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
I knew what he was doing there.
Where's my walk? I stepped down from being a pastor, and I didn't know if I would ever do anything again, and part of the driving that was, frankly, I didn't know if God would ever use me again.
Sure. Oh, I hear you, brother.
But honestly, I was fine if he didn't. I just had to have God.
Yes.
Yeah.
I almost felt like it was time to restart and reboot everything.
Oh, man.
And so I went back to the beginning roots of my faith. What is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that drives me? One of the things that killed me as a pastor, and the church needs to hear this, I had my hand in everything. I was, if somebody didn't want to do it, I would do it.
Building and grounds.
Right.
Decorating.
Every
Christmas event.
Yeah,
all of it.
I was trying to do it all, and so where am I at today? I've walked away from all of that stuff. I've learned that if there's not somebody that can fill that hole in the church, it's okay. Don't try to make somebody, and because you get into trouble. I did a recovery group for a while. I really, really enjoyed doing that, but finally turned that over to somebody else who I was hoping could take it further, and do more with it. That was another process in my life of learning, hey, you know what? There's actually people in this world that can do it better than you, and you need to plug these people in, man. How can you move on with God if you don't plug somebody in? I heard a CEO tell me one time, if I don't train somebody to do my job, I can't be promoted.
Yeah. Because
there's nobody to replace me.
Yeah.
And so we put somebody in there, and so what I'm doing today, I'm loving being the family guy. I hate to make it sound like I don't have a ministry, because I do. I still deal a lot with addicts, you know, on the telephone. You know, some of them will come over, mostly on the phone or that kind of thing. A lot of face chats or whatever, you know, and just enjoying life again, you know, and not really looking for a ministry. That was one of the things that got me in trouble, you know, was feeling like I had to have one to begin with, you know, the quote unquote official ministry, you know. Now I'm just loving life, man. I'm loving my family. I love being a grandpa. I'm not sure how my kids feel about that, you know. I learn, you know, I noticed my granddaughter not long ago. She comes up to me to be held in a very unique way, you know, and it really spoke volumes to me on how I approach God. She walks up to me, and then she turns around, she turns her back to me, and then backs up, you know, kind of into my knees.
Yeah.
And she just goes, "Papa," you know. She doesn't scream and cry like she's got to manipulate me, you know. She doesn't demand and stomp her feet. You know, we got those Christians in the church. Just demand it and stomp your feet and you'll get it, you know. Yeah. You'll get a spanking in my house for that, you know. So, but what she does is she trusts my love. She has faith in me.
That's great.
That is so deep. She could turn her back to me and just go, "Papa." Yeah. And she knows I'll pick her up. She knows I'll love her. And she may want off my lap immediately after that. She just wants a hug, you know? And
just checking that you're there, Papa.
Huh?
Just checking that you're there, Papa. Just need to know you got me.
Making sure that you still love me, you know?
You got me.
And I'm loving that, you know? I'm eating that up.
That's cool.
So God's just, He's teaching me all new stuff, you know. Here I am, I'm 60 years old, and I thought I had a grip on this thing called Christianity, but I'm learning daily how much I don't know, you know.
The older I get, the more I don't, the more I know I don't know.
Yeah.
The more I read that book, the more I know I don't know. The more I know I want and need, right?
Yeah.
Right. When I think about addiction, for me, and you tell me if this makes sense. When I think about addiction, I think that in New Testament times, in Jesus' first century faith perspective, I think they might have called it demon possession. I think they might have called it that. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we're wrong and they're right, or they're right and we're wrong. But I think there's such a difference between some of the things we run into sin-wise and people who are addicted. Because I think there comes a point, and you described it, and you said Nikki Sixx described when he felt that breakover moment. I think there comes a point when you stop being in charge and the drug or the demon, call it what you will, is driving now. And I think one of the toughest things for me that we do to people who are broken with addiction, people who are dealing with addiction of opioids, narcotics, I think there comes a breakover point where we're mad at them. And it's really kind of not fair. Mm-hmm. They're owned by that thing. Mm-hmm. No different than if I said Kevin has been possessed by a demon, and people who believe in demons believe that, mm-hmm. they would remove a lot of the responsibility, a lot of the that we put on addicted people. But when we say they're addicted, what they say is, and I know this because I have a niece and a nephew who both went through addiction. I know in conversations with people, they're like, she could stop if she wanted. She did this. She did this. Mm-hmm. He did this. They did this to themselves. They decided to do this. Mm-hmm. You have a little different ride because yours was prescription drugs, but you know it deeply enough. I guess I'm saying, I'm asking you to confirm what I'm saying, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to say, does that make sense? Is that a good way of thinking of it?
It makes sense. I mean, is an addiction a choice? It all comes back to that. Is it a choice or is it a disease?
Right.
You know, and I think for some it's a choice. I think for some, you know, the thing is, man, here's what I learned hard. Drugs are not prejudice. They are not, they don't care who you are.
Rich, poor, black, white, pastor.
Yeah, they don't care.
In the street.
They don't care how long you've been in church. They don't care.
Yeah.
You know, they will. Yeah. You don't have enough anointing. You don't have enough oomph from God to play with hard narcotics and get away with it.
And that's why I think of it as a demon. I think of it that way.
It is.
It takes control.
It is.
At some point, and you're going to need.
God, I think, I felt like for me, sometimes God was just like, you want to play with that? I'll let you play with that. You know, he said it in Romans 1. I gave them over to their sin.
Yeah.
So, you know.
You want to play with that?
Yeah. You want to mess with that?
Party on. I'm going to watch for a while.
Yeah. Doesn't mean he doesn't love me. No. You know.
You want your inheritance and you want to leave?
Yeah.
Here's your stuff.
Absolutely.
Let me know when you're ready to come back.
There's another addiction story.
Yeah.
Spent every dime he had on
gambling and prostitutes.
On partying, man.
Yep.
I get that. I learned, I tell you, one of the big things that come out of it was if I had not been addicted, if I hadn't have gone through it, okay, I wouldn't look at addicts the way I look at them today. I just wouldn't, you know. I wouldn't be able to love them the way I love them today, you know. I wouldn't be able to say, hey, there's a place for you in God, you know. A lot of people were so afraid of being seen as a failure, being seen as a loser, being seen as, you know, worthless, you know. I could address those issues now. Not from reading a book about it, you know, but from living it. You know, I can tell them, look, I know what it's like, man. But at the same time, I also, on the other end of that, I was just dealing with an addict. He didn't want to hear what it was I was saying. And out of love and out of knowledge of, I've only dealt with this guy for 2 weeks, but I'm already at a place where I can't go any further with him. And so I just told him on the phone, I just said, hey, you know what? There's nothing else I can do for you. What do you mean there's nothing? What are you talking? Unless you are willing to do this and this and this, I cannot help you. You're on your own. You know.
Do you want to get well?
No.
That's what I'm saying, though. That's the Jesus question.
It goes right back to that.
Do you want to get well?
It goes right back to that.
Well, when you're ready to get well, you let me know.
Yep.
And we'll go.
But back to what you were just saying a minute ago, in that, I mean, that just brings to light the whole thing about what we go through, bad, the horrible things, the Lord can use those situations, if we allow Him, can use those situations to help somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, I too, like you guys, I'm very happy that there's those people who haven't ever gone through, you know, some of the things that may be raised in the church, truly understood what it meant to be saved at a young age and have always been there.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. It's also just as wonderful the people who have been through the struggles and come through them, and now the Lord's able to use those things to be a blessing to somebody else.
I'm reminded whenever I think of those moments where your struggle can help someone else. When we watch Jesus walking through his ministry over and over and over and over again, he says, sell everything you have and follow me. Okay, I don't have a place to stay. You want to come live with me? I don't have a place to live, so just be aware of that. But come follow me anyway. Come do this with me. There's one example that jumps out to me of the opposite, and it reminds me of what Kevin is going through, and that is there's the demon-possessed man in the graveyard. He's out there, and he's so overrun that when Jesus says, "What is your name?" he says, "We are Legion." It's like I'm just full of this, just completely overrun with this. But when Jesus heals him, because everybody knows who he is, they're chaining him to gravestones out there so he won't come back and hurt people. Everybody knows who he is. When Jesus heals him, he begs. It says both in Matthew and in Luke, it tells the story the same way. He begs to go with Jesus on his trip. It's the one guy that I know of that Jesus says, no, I need you to stay here and go to your people and tell them what happened and of who I am. And I think that fits so much, Kevin, where you're at. It's just like, no, I need you to tell people how you were healed and where you are and what's real, not because nobody was looking at this dude thinking, oh, that's so pretty and what a special, sweet little story of how he came to the altar and no, he went hard, and he was hurt. He was hit hard by darkness, and so when he was. I think there are people like you, Kevin, there are people like this conversation where we're sending this out to people where you're supposed to say, this is real.
I want to address something that you said earlier.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I hear the addict out there going, when you say, okay, but did they want to get well?
Yeah.
I hear the addict out there already saying, I want to get well. I wanted to. But they've said that 10 times. Okay? I want to address that.
Oh, hit me.
Because it's important. Dave Mustaine, he's lead frontman for Megadeth. Okay? Not exactly a Christian group. His drug of choice is Jack Daniels. It's alcohol. Alcohol is the one drug we don't hardly ever talk about.
No.
You know, but so he had to get clean. You know, his managers were telling him, "Look, you won't survive another tour with this band. You will die on the road." You know, and so he wasn't going to. These free clinics where, you're eating jailhouse food. And I mean, he was going to like the Betty Ford clinic. Yeah. You drop $100,000 or so, to get clean. Okay. He went 15 times. 15 times Dave went to different rehabs to get clean. Never worked one time. We're talking about it. When you're investing $75,000, $100,000, you're serious.
You're serious.
You're pretty serious about wanting to get clean. So, long story short, Dave finds Jesus.
Amen. Yeah.
Dave runs into him in the most inconvenient ways, and he's in a band where millions of kids know his name, and everybody's expecting him to do, hey man, Megadeth won't make it without you, and he starts to learn to give his life to Christ, and he goes back to a rehab one time, but this time with a Bible.
With Jesus.
And Jesus in his heart.
Jesus. With the Savior.
Yes. And he got clean.
Yeah.
And he's been clean ever since. Now he preaches. He's got hair down to his belt, but I think it looks good myself. I mean, if I could still do it, I'd do it.
Yeah.
But So he was that guy who would have answered the question, yes, I want, but where's the hope for me?
Yeah.
Sometimes they have no hope. Sometimes in order for them to honestly go, okay, I want to get free and I'm in this, I'm in it, man, we got to give them some hope. We got to give them a reason to believe you can actually change.
Yeah.
You can actually, you may not be able to do it on your own. That's okay, because I couldn't either.
Yeah.
You know? I'd like to say I was the man, I was the man when it come to getting clean.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. You know? It took me and Jesus. And
as Johnny Cash said, and I came to believe in a power much greater than
yeah.
mine.
You know what? And now, you ask me what I'm doing now. I'll tell you one thing I'm doing now that's huge. Now that I'm not pastoring, I have some actual time on my hands. I have old friends calling me up, going, man, I'm hurting, dude.
Yeah.
I am hurting. You know, they know my story now. Everybody that is remotely related to me knows my story. I stood up in a gymnasium with 500 people there, all the prominent members of our town, senator, the whole bit, and I told my story. Everybody knows it, okay? So now, these people, these friends of mine, because I have friends that, you know, Bible says Jesus was a friend of sinners. We forgot that.
Yeah.
We forgot what it means to be a friend of sinners.
Great point.
And one of the things that's happened to me, you know, is I've become a friend of sinners. I told my church one time, we were vision casting. They want to know, you know, if you could create the perfect church in your mind and in your heart, what would that church be? Like, what would it look like? You know, people are like, oh man, I'd have this crazy praise team, you know, and I'd have all these different ministries that were rocking, you know. And when it got around to me, they said, well, what's your vision? I said, oh, that's easy, man. I want a parking lot full of cigarette butts.
Yeah.
And they were like, what?
And pickup trucks with beer cans in the back.
Yeah. I want a parking lot full. And you know what? I got that. Before I retired as a pastor, and I come full circle with this whole mess, and I come out healed, I actually had addicts showing up for church, smoking cigarettes 5 minutes before praise and worship, you know, getting that last puff in. I love addicts, man. They're getting that last puff in. We put a cigarette thing out there for them.
Please.
You know, because they had to have it, you know, and bless God, we were the only church in Port. I'm sure there were people doing it. Have you seen Culy's church, man?
Yeah.
Them guys are freaks. I want freaks.
Yeah.
You know, if I ever pastor a church again, I will never, ever, ever settle for the norm. If it's not got freaks involved in some way, I want normal people too. I'm cool with normal people. I think they're nerds, but you know, I like them.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I like them.
hear you.
Yeah,
We need those.
Yeah.
We need that melting pot.
my dad's a normal
We need
person.
that melting pot.
My dad's a normal person, and you know what? I don't know a more godly man in all of my days than my dad. You know, my mom and dad are the epitome of godliness and holiness, and we need that.
We need that melting pot.
Yep.
We need our kids to be able to look over and go, "That's possible.
Yeah,
That's possible.
That's what I want.
I could do that."
Yep.
But we also need our kids to be able to have gone down a hole and know. I also know those two guys who got out of the hole.
We need a couple pastors with full sleeve tattoos.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and we need grandmas that know how to love. You know, in the Bible, it was the grandmas loving on the young ladies. It was the grandpas loving on the young men, teaching them how to be warriors, and instead of the pastor doing all of that.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the song Gratitude? Have you heard that? It's the guy who sings it has dreadlocks down to his waist, sleeve, you know, full sleeve tattoos, and when he sings, man, my heart melts. You know, because I know this dude's been through it. I know he has. and he sings about just gratitude to the Lord. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Hey, Kevin, thank you for coming in and talking to us.
Thanks for having
Before we shut her down, is there anything that you wish you had said before we got out of here?
No, I really don't.
right.
I'm going to think of something 5 minutes down the road.
Absolutely.
But
But that's when we always have our best thoughts is when we're done. But guys, thank you for joining us
Thank
for
you,
the
guys.
conversation.
Thank you, bud.
Please comment. Let us know what you're thinking. Ask questions. We want to be a part of what you're doing each week. If you've made it all the way to the end, will you get a gold star? And please share and follow so that others know what's going on and that we're here to have a real conversation. Love you guys. See ya.
Bye.